All right, by popular demand, here's a little video I'm going to walk you through. It'll be either a 2 or 3-parter of making a GUI game in NetBeans using things like disabling, enabling buttons, putting numbers and text in the text boxes, etc., etc. Now I'm almost starting from scratch here. What I've done is I basically started off a project. I added a new JFrame form to it. And this is the form here that you see. I've added a couple of swing buttons, and I've added a couple of swing text fields. I've given them names. So for instance, that button right there, properties, text, role, that's what you see in the box. And code, I've given the name of the button a nice name like button role. You'll see there I have button lower, button higher, button role 2. Text boxes, text role 1, text role 2, whoops, text role 2, text result. Now what this game is going to do, the player is going to click roll. A dice is going to be rolled there, so the number 1 to 6 is going to show up. The user is then going to select either lower or higher, trying to guess what the next roll is going to be. This button will become enabled so they can use it, and when they click it, it's going to roll a second dice. Whatever the dice comes out to be, if they were right, it'll print out good for you, you were right, or it'll print out you were wrong. And that's basically the game. Now, a real game, you might want to add a little money, betting, something like that, right? This is just to show you the basics. Once you have your frame, notice my frame's just been made tiny here. Once you have your frame designed, what I want to do is I want to go to the code and think about the actual game and the variables that my program's going to need to use. So what I'm going to do here is I can just get to the code by going to source. And if you guys remember that up here at the top of the class is where I'm going to make my variables. So I know that I'm going to be rolling 2 different die at some point. So I may as well make these variables here. I'm going to call them die 1 and integer die 2. What else do I need to know? I also need to know when the user selects lower or higher, I need to remember that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable here called choice. And I can just use a string for this if I want. String choice. I'll just set it equal to nothing for now. Okay, those are my variables. Roll 2 dice, make a choice, write some response. Now, what I want to do is go back to my design view, and I want to control the interface. Now, right now, I don't want them just hitting higher or lower when the game starts. For instance, when I give this a run right now, it's going to make this frame, but you can see I can already click lower, I can already click this button. There has to be a way to prevent these buttons from being pressed right off the bat. So there's 2 ways I can do it. And the 2 ways are both pretty easy. What I can do is I can go right in here. This is called the constructor. This method here happens right when you create the frame. And you'll see here it says initialize components. That's a big chunk of code that the GUI editor in NetBeans has written for us. And that basically sets up all the pieces on the frame. Right after this, I can start naming buttons and then telling them to be disabled or enabled. So let's say I only want the roll button to be enabled. I want lower, button higher, and button roll 2 to be off. So what I can do is I can say button higher dot set enabled, and I can give it the value, whoops, false. Button lower set enabled, bad typing today, false, and button roll 2 set enabled, false. That's doing it with code. Now, of course, there's actually an easy way to do that. I could have gone to the design window, and I could have also just taken one of the buttons, gone to properties, and if I scroll down a little bit, you can see here there's something called enabled. I could have just unchecked enabled, and it would disable it. You can see it's already disabled. Now, my code's going to do that anyway, so when I run it now, you'll see that the only button left enabled is the run. So just to let you know, there's either or, way to do that there. Code or with the editor. Now I'm going to hit roll. When I hit roll, I want a number popping up there. So let's give this a go. Double click on roll. And there's button roll action performed. Remembering that my variable that I made earlier was called die1. Let's go get a value for it. Die1 equals, and here's a little bit of our random code from before, math.random times 6 plus 1. Now where do I want this thing to show up? This 1 to 6 value has to show up inside of text roll 1. This is a number going in a text box, so you have to do a conversion. So this was called text roll 1 dot set text. Now if I do this, we get the red line. That's an integer, and it says it needs a string. So remember, there's two tricks you can do. You can either convert it with integer. Let me just do it the long way here. You can either convert it with integer dot to string die1. That works. Or I could have done this. Text roll 1 set text quote quote plus die1. I know which one you're going to probably pick. The auto convert version. But these two lines do the exact same thing. So you can choose one, take out the other. So give this a little test to make sure it's working. And roll, roll, roll. Perfect. Values 1 to 6. Now I'm going to get that centered in the box. Then I'm going to take care of lower and higher. So after I hit roll, I'd like this button to turn off, these buttons to turn on. So here we go. After I do the roll, let's do button roll dot set enabled to false. And let's turn those other two buttons now on. Button enabled true, button lower enabled true. This is just nice, simple, whoops, spelled it wrong, set enabled. This is just nice control here and makes the flow of the program work nicely. I like to keep testing as I write really frequently. That way if you make a mistake, roll. Now I get to pick lower or higher. Test frequently and then you know where your problems are. So let's now code lower and higher. So let's go to design. Let's do the lower. There's lower. So they just picked lower. Basically, what I want to do now is I want to remember their choice. So I'm going to say, hey, choice variable. Set yourself equal to lower. And I need to turn these buttons off. Button higher dot set enabled to false. Button lower set enabled to false. Now while I'm in here, I may as well do the same idea with the high button. So design the higher button. The only difference is now that the choice is higher. Now some of you may be saying, could I have just remembered a variable like an integer instead and remembered a 1 and here remember a 2? Yes, you could have. I'm just trying to throw a little variety there, so I throw the strings in there as well. Now let's test our program out. I roll, I pick. Remember, I'm remembering that this was a 3. And really, I want this button enabled, right? Oh, forgot about that. So we got to go back, and let's get this button enabled so I can roll my second dice. So when I go to do that button, and let's add that same code here as well. And that button turns on. Now, after I test this, that's where I'm going to cut this video, and then I'll jump to the second one. You may already have a good idea that you know what you're doing, and this may be enough to get you going. But roll, 2, let's guess higher. It's remembering, right? Choice equals higher. And now I'm going to code the roll. It's going to roll another dice, put it in there, and it's going to tell me my result. Was I right? Was this die higher than this die or lower than that die? right? Tell me my feedback. Turn this button off and turn this scroll button back on and clear the text box out. So maybe you can go ahead and do that on your own. That's going to be part 2 of the video. Thanks for watching.